The ultrasound photo arrived on a Tuesday morning, and I should have known right then that my life was about to become a Stephen King novel. My wife Vanessa handed it to me with tears in her eyes, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling just enough to sell the performance. "We're having a baby, Eli," she whispered, her voice catching in that practiced way that had fooled me for 8 years of marriage. I stared at the grainy black and white image, squinting at what looked like a kidney bean floating in static. After 3 years of trying and countless negative pregnancy tests, this moment should have felt like winning the lottery. Instead, something cold settled in my stomach like bad coffee. "This is incredible, Van," I managed, pulling her into what I hoped looked like a celebratory hug. Over her shoulder, I studied the image again. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Vanessa pulled back, wiping her eyes with tissue she'd apparently prepared in advance. "I wanted to surprise you. I went to Dr. Morrison's office yesterday for the confirmation." Dr. Morrison. The same doctor who'd been telling us for months that everything looked fine, that we just needed to keep trying. The same doctor who'd never mentioned scheduling any appointments this week. "That's wonderful, honey, really wonderful." I forced enthusiasm into my voice while my brain started cataloging inconsistencies. "When's the due date?" "March 15th, she said quickly. Too quickly, like she'd rehearsed it. I nodded and smiled, playing the role of the ecstatic husband, while something darker took root in my mind. You see, I run a small security consulting business here in Pine Harbor, Maine. It's not glamorous work, mostly installing alarm systems and running background checks for local businesses, but it's taught me to notice details. And the details of this morning weren't adding up. First, Vanessa had been unusually secretive about her whereabouts yesterday. She'd claimed to be having lunch with her sister Rachel, but when I'd called Rachel's office around 2 p.m. to ask about borrowing their truck, her secretary said Rachel was in meetings all day and hadn't left for lunch. Second, Vanessa had been asking for cash lately. Small amounts, 50 here, 100 there, claiming she wanted to surprise me with something special. In 8 years of marriage, Vanessa had never been the surprising type. She was methodical, calculated, the kind of person who made grocery lists for grocery lists. Third, and this was the detail that really bothered me, she'd been different in bed. Distant, going through the motions. For someone who'd supposedly just discovered she was carrying our first child, she seemed remarkably unaffected by the news. But I smiled and kissed her forehead and told her how happy I was, because that's what good husbands do, even when their instincts are screaming that something's wrong. "I should call my sister Jenna," I said, pulling out my phone. "She'll want to see this." Vanessa's hand shot out, covering my phone. "Maybe we should wait? You know how she gets about medical stuff? I'd rather tell her in person." Jenna was a radiologist at Maine Medical Center, one of the best in the state. If anyone could tell me whether this ultrasound was legitimate, it would be her, which was probably exactly why Vanessa didn't want me showing it to her. "Of course," I said. "Whatever you think is best." Vanessa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I need to get ready for work. We can talk more tonight?" I nodded and watched her glide up the stairs to our bedroom, her movements fluid and practiced. Everything about Vanessa was practiced these days. Even her spontaneous moments felt choreographed. After I heard the shower start, I took a photo of the ultrasound with my phone and sent it to Jenna with a message. "Guess who's going to be an uncle? Van surprised me this morning. Thoughts?" Then I sat in our kitchen, drinking coffee that tasted like ashes, and waited for my world to fall apart. Jenna called back within an hour. I was in my home office, a converted basement room where I handled the paperwork side of my business, when my phone buzzed. "Eli." Her voice was tight, professional. The tone she used when delivering bad news to patients' families. "We need to talk, now." My stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the hospital?" "I'm in the radiology department." "Jenna, you're scaring me. Just tell me what—" "Eli." She cut me off. "That ultrasound image you sent me? It's not from Dr. Morrison's office. It's not from any office in Maine. And unless Vanessa has been hiding some very unusual anatomy, it's not from her body either." The coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering against the concrete floor. "What do you mean?" "I mean, someone downloaded that image from the internet. The metadata shows it was created in Germany 3 years ago. It's been floating around medical websites as a textbook example of a 12-week fetus." I closed my eyes, feeling the last of my hope drain away. "You're sure?" "Absolutely sure. Eli, I'm sorry, but your wife is lying to you. The question is why? Why? That was the question that would haunt me for the next several hours as I drove to Maine Medical Center. Why would Vanessa fake a pregnancy? What did she have to gain? And more importantly, what did I have to lose? Jenna was waiting for me in her office, a small, cluttered space that smelled like coffee and antiseptic. She was younger than me by 3 years, but the stress of her job had carved worry lines around her eyes that made her look older. Today, those lines seemed deeper than usual. Show me, I said without preamble. She pulled up the image on her computer screen, then opened another window showing the original German medical file. They were identical, down to the timestamp and resolution. I ran it through every database I have access to, she said quietly. This image has been used in medical textbooks, training materials, and about a dozen different pregnancy websites. It's literally the first result if you Google 12-week ultrasound example. I stared at the screen, feeling something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. She's not pregnant. No, she's not. Then why, I asked, though part of me was already beginning to understand. Jenna leaned back in her chair, studying my face. When did she first tell you about this pregnancy? This morning. She said she went to Dr. Morrison yesterday for confirmation. I called Morrison's office before you got here. Vanessa hasn't been seen there in over 6 months. The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Vanessa's requests for cash, her secretive behavior, her sudden distance in our relationship. She was planning something, and whatever it was required money and required me to believe she was pregnant. There's something else, Jenna said hesitantly. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I saw Vanessa last week at Rosario's, that Italian place downtown. She was with a man I didn't recognize. They looked close. Rosario's. Vanessa had told me she was working late that night, handling some crisis at the hospital where she worked in public relations. Another lie in what was apparently a web of lies. What did he look like? Tall, dark hair, expensive suit, older, maybe early 40s. They were holding hands across the table. I felt something break inside me, a clean snap like a bone under pressure. 8 years of marriage, 3 years of trying for a baby, and she was playing house with some stranger while feeding me downloaded ultrasound images. What are you going to do? Jenna asked. I stood up, my mind already working through possibilities. I'm going to find out exactly what game she's playing, and then I'm going to beat her at it. Eli, be careful. If she's desperate enough to fake a pregnancy, there's no telling what else she might do. I kissed my sister's forehead and headed for the door. Don't worry about me. Worry about her. I've always been good at reading people. It's a necessary skill in my line of work. You can't install security systems for someone without understanding what they're really afraid of. But somehow I'd been blind to my own wife's deception. That was about to change. I started with the basics. Phone records, credit card statements, bank accounts. The beauty of being married is that you have legitimate access to most of your spouse's information. The curse of being married to someone who's betraying you is discovering exactly how they've been using that access against you. Vanessa's phone records told the first part of the story. Over the past 2 months, she'd been exchanging dozens of calls and texts with a number I didn't recognize. The calls were long, some lasting over an hour, and they happened at times when she told me she was busy with work. The credit card statements were even more revealing. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to, purchases at lingerie stores during her lunch breaks, and a particularly interesting charge at a medical supply company 2 weeks ago. A medical supply company that, according to their website, specialized in realistic pregnancy simulation products for educational and entertainment purposes. Entertainment purposes. My wife had bought fake pregnancy supplies for entertainment. I was sitting in my office, surrounded by printouts and growing angrier by the minute, when my phone rang. Vanessa, calling from work. Hi, honey, she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. I was thinking we should celebrate tonight. Maybe dinner at that steakhouse you like? Sounds great, I managed. How are you feeling? Any morning sickness? A little queasy, but nothing I can't handle. Dr. Morrison says that's completely normal. Dr. Morrison, who hadn't seen her in 6 months. I made a note to myself to see just how deep this lie went. That's good. Hey, can I ask you something? Of course. Yesterday, when you went to the doctor, did you drive straight there from work? There was a pause. Just a heartbeat, but long enough for me to know she was calculating her response. Yes. Why? I was just wondering about parking. You know how crazy downtown gets. Oh, it wasn't too bad. I found a spot right away. Another lie. Morrison's office was in the medical complex on the other side of town, nowhere near downtown. She was getting sloppy, or maybe she just didn't think I was smart enough to catch her. Great. I'll see you tonight then. Love you, she said. Love you too, I replied, and hung up before the words could choke me. I spent the rest of the afternoon making phone calls. The first was to my friend Dave Kowalski, a former police detective who now ran his own private investigation business. Dave and I had known each other since high school, and he owed me a favor from when I'd helped him install a security system at his office. I need surveillance on my wife, I told him without preamble. Jesus, Eli, what's going on? I gave him the condensed version, the fake ultrasound, the mysterious phone calls, the restaurant sightings. Dave listened without interrupting, making occasional grunts of acknowledgement. You want to know who she's seeing, he said when I finished. I want to know everything, who he is, where they meet, what they're planning, all of it. This is going to cost you, and it's going to hurt. I'm already hurting. At least this way I'll know why. Dave agreed to start surveillance the next day. My next call was to my lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Henley, who'd handled the legal side of my business incorporation. I need to understand my options, I told her. Hypothetically, if someone were to discover their spouse was committing fraud, what would be the best way to protect their assets? Patricia was too professional to ask directly, but I could hear the curiosity in her voice as she walked me through the basics of asset protection and divorce proceedings. The key, she explained, was documentation. Evidence. Proof of wrongdoing that couldn't be disputed or explained away. Hypothetically, she said, the spouse who could prove fraud would be in a much stronger position in any legal proceedings. I thanked her and hung up, feeling the first stirrings of a plan forming in my mind. Vanessa thought she was playing me for a fool. She thought her fake pregnancy and her secret affair would somehow benefit her at my expense. She was about to learn that underestimating people is a dangerous game. That evening, over dinner at the steakhouse, I watched my wife perform. She ordered carefully, avoiding alcohol and making a show of asking the waiter about which dishes were safe for pregnant women. She placed her hand on her still flat stomach and talked about nursery colors and baby names. She was good. I had to give her that. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have been completely convinced. I was thinking, she said over dessert, maybe we should start looking at bigger houses. This place is going to feel pretty small with a baby. Bigger houses cost money, I said carefully. Well, we've been saving for years, and I was thinking maybe we could take out a loan against your business, just to give us some extra cushion while I'm on maternity leave. There it was, the real reason for the fake pregnancy. Vanessa wanted money, and she needed a reason to access our savings and my business assets. The pregnancy was her cover story, her way of making large expenditures seem reasonable and necessary. That's a good idea, I said, smiling at her across the table. Let me talk to Patricia about the best way to structure something like that. Vanessa's eyes lit up. Really? You think it's a good idea? I think we should do whatever's best for our family, I said, meaning every word in a way she couldn't possibly understand. Dave's surveillance report arrived 3 days later, and it was worse than I'd imagined. The man Vanessa was seeing wasn't just some random affair. He was Dr. Colin Royce, a prominent surgeon at the same hospital where she worked. Married with 2 kids, and according to Dave's research, a history of questionable financial dealings that had somehow never quite resulted in formal charges. The photos Dave had taken told the story clearly. Vanessa and Colin entering a downtown hotel together during lunch breaks. Vanessa leaving Colin's BMW in the hospital parking garage after hours. Colin handing Vanessa an envelope outside a coffee shop, an envelope thick enough to contain cash. But the most incriminating evidence was a recording Dave had managed to capture using a directional microphone. Vanessa and Colin sitting on a park bench during what appeared to be a casual conversation, discussing their timeline and how much money they would need to make this work. The pregnancy story is perfect, Vanessa's voice came through clearly on the recording. Eli's so desperate for a baby, he'll believe anything. And once I have access to his business accounts, we can take what we need and disappear. Colin's response chilled me to the bone. Just make sure you can maintain the charade long enough. We need at least $200,000 to make this worthwhile. $200,000. My entire business, my savings, everything I'd worked for since college. They were planning to clean me out and vanish, leaving me bankrupt and heartbroken. I sat in my office listening to my wife plan my destruction, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but they were being overtaken by something colder and more focused. Anger, yes, but controlled anger. Calculating anger. Vanessa thought she was playing a game against an unsuspecting Mark. What she didn't realize was that she just turned it into a competition against someone who made his living by staying 3 steps ahead of people with bad intentions. I called Dave first. I need you to dig deeper into Colin Royce. Financial records, professional history, personal life, everything. Already on it, Dave said. This guy's dirty, Eli. I can smell it from here. Next, I called Patricia. I need to set up some financial protections, I told her, and I need to understand the legal implications of recording someone without their knowledge in Maine. Maine is a one-party consent state, she said. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's legal. Are you planning to record conversations with your wife? Among other things. Be careful, Eli. Make sure whatever you're planning is legal. Revenge feels good in the moment, but not if it lands you in jail. I assured her I had no intention of doing anything illegal, which was true. What I was planning was going to be perfectly legal. It was also going to be devastating. That evening, I put the first part of my plan into motion. I came home with flowers and a bottle of sparkling cider, playing the role of the excited, expectant father. I've been thinking about what you said, I told Vanessa over dinner, about the loan against the business. I talked to Patricia today, and she thinks it's a great idea. Vanessa's face lit up. Really? Really. In fact, she suggested we could access up to $300,000 if we structure it right. She's drawing up the paperwork now. I watched Vanessa's eyes widen at the figure. $300,000 was more than she and Colin had been planning to steal. I could practically see her recalculating her timeline. That seems like a lot, she said, but her tone suggested she was anything but concerned about the amount. Well, babies are expensive, and I want to make sure we have everything we need. I reached across the table and took her hand. I love you, Van. I want to give you and our baby the best of everything. She squeezed my hand, and for a moment, I almost saw something that looked like guilt flicker across her face. Almost. I love you too, she said, and I wondered if she even remembered what those words were supposed to mean. Over the next week, I played the part of the devoted husband preparing for fatherhood. I researched cribs and car seats, talked about converting the spare bedroom into a nursery, and made a show of calling my parents to share the good news. All the while, I was building my case and setting my trap. Dave's deeper investigation into Colin Royce revealed a pattern of financial impropriety going back years. Kickbacks from medical device companies, inflated billing to insurance providers, and at least 2 previous affairs with hospital employees that had been quietly covered up by administration. Colin wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was a serial predator who used his position to manipulate vulnerable women. The picture that emerged was clear. Colin had targeted Vanessa, seduced her, and convinced her to participate in this scheme to defraud me. Whether Vanessa was a willing participant or another victim was something I'd have to determine later. Right now, I was focused on stopping them both. The breakthrough came when Dave managed to plant a listening device in Colin's car during one of his hospital shifts. The recording he captured was pure gold. She's pushing for more money, Vanessa's voice said. Her husband is willing to go up to $300,000. Perfect, Colin replied. That's enough for us to disappear completely. South America, maybe. Somewhere without extradition treaties. What about your wife, your kids? What about them? They'll be better off without me. And besides, by the time anyone figures out what happened, we'll be long gone. Listening to that conversation, I realized that Vanessa wasn't just another victim. She was a full partner in this scheme, willing to destroy my life and help Colin abandon his family for money. Whatever sympathy I might have felt for her evaporated in that moment. It was time to spring my trap. I chose a Friday evening for the confrontation. Vanessa had been dropping increasingly obvious hints about needing money for baby preparations, and I'd been playing along, telling her the loan paperwork was almost ready. What she didn't know was that I'd spent the week preparing for war. Dave had helped me install hidden cameras throughout our house, all perfectly legal since it was my property and I was present during the recordings. Patricia had reviewed all the evidence I'd gathered and confirmed that it would be admissible in both divorce proceedings and any potential criminal charges. And I had made copies of everything, storing them in multiple locations where Vanessa couldn't access or destroy them. I came home that evening with a bottle of wine and Chinese takeout, acting like a man who had good news to share. The loan came through, I announced as we sat down to dinner. Patricia says we can have the money by Monday. Vanessa's excitement was palpable. 300,000? Actually, she managed to structure it for 400. Something about using the house as an additional collateral. I watched Vanessa's face carefully as I delivered this news. The greed in her eyes was unmistakable. But there was something else there, too. Relief, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "That's wonderful," she said. "I can't wait to start shopping for baby things." "About that," I said, setting down my chopsticks. "I have something I need to ask you." "What is it?" I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery, scrolling to the ultrasound image she'd shown me 2 weeks earlier. "This picture you gave me, where exactly did you get it?" Vanessa's smile faltered slightly. "From Dr. Morrison's office. I told you that." "Right, but here's the thing." I swiped to the next image, a screenshot of the German medical website where the photo had originated. This exact same image appears on a medical training website. Same resolution, same timestamp, everything. The color drained from Vanessa's face. "I don't understand what you're trying to say." "I'm saying this ultrasound isn't yours, Van. It's not from Dr. Morrison's office, and it's not from your body. It's a stock photo you downloaded from the internet." Vanessa stood up abruptly, knocking over her wine glass. "That's ridiculous. Why would I do something like that? That's exactly what I've been trying to figure out." I stood up too, pulling out the folder of evidence I'd prepared. "Maybe it has something to do with these phone records showing dozens of calls to Dr. Colin Royce. Or these credit card statements showing charges at restaurants where you've been meeting him. Or maybe it has something to do with this." I pressed play on the audio recording Dave had captured in Colin's car. Vanessa's own voice filled the room, discussing their plan to steal my money and disappear together. Vanessa went completely still, her face cycling through shock, fear, and finally, cold calculation. When the recording ended, she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, pure hatred. "You've been spying on me," she said. "I've been protecting myself from you. This is illegal. You can't record people without their permission. Actually, in Maine, I can. One-party consent state. And since these recordings involve plans to defraud me, they're completely admissible in court." Vanessa sank back into her chair, the fight going out of her. "What do you want?" "I want the truth. All of it. How long have you been planning this? How long have you been sleeping with Colin? And how long have you been planning to destroy my life?" For a moment, I thought she might try to deny everything or attempt to explain it away. Instead, she laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that made my skin crawl. "You want the truth? Fine. I've been seeing Colin for 6 months. The pregnancy was his idea. He said you were so desperate for a baby that you'd believe anything. We were going to take your money and start over somewhere new. And you were okay with that? With destroying everything we've built together? What have we built, Eli? A boring life in a boring town with a boring man who installs alarm systems for a living? Colin offered me something better." The casual cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. 8 years of marriage, reduced to boring in her mind. "What about love? What about the vows we took? Love doesn't pay for the kind of life I want to live." I stared at this woman I'd shared a bed with for 8 years and realized I'd never really known her at all. The Vanessa I'd married, or thought I'd married, had been as much of a performance as her fake pregnancy. "Well, I said finally, I hope Colin's worth it, because you're about to lose everything for him." "What do you mean?" I smiled, and I could feel that it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I mean, I've already filed for divorce. I've frozen all our joint accounts. I've provided evidence of your fraud to both the police and to the administration at your hospital. And I've sent copies of these recordings to Colin's wife." Vanessa's face went white. "You can't do that." "I already did. In fact, if I had to guess, Colin's wife is confronting him right about now. Dave's been keeping an eye on him today." As if on cue, Vanessa's phone started buzzing. Colin's number appeared on the screen. She answered it with shaking hands. "Colin?" Her voice was barely a whisper. I couldn't hear his side of the conversation, but from Vanessa's increasingly panicked responses, it was clear that Colin's world was falling apart as quickly as hers. "What do you mean she took the kids?" "No, We can't just leave now. He has evidence. I don't know what we're going to do." She hung up and looked at me with something approaching desperation. "Eli, please. We can work this out. I made a mistake, but we can fix this." "No," I said simply. "We can't. I'll call off the whole thing. I'll tell Colin it's over. We can go back to the way things were." The way things were was built on lies. I'm not interested in building anything else on that foundation. Vanessa started crying then, real tears, not the performed emotion she'd been showing me for weeks. But it was too late for tears. She'd made her choice when she decided to fake a pregnancy to steal my life savings. She'd made her choice when she planned to disappear with another man, leaving me bankrupt and broken. Now she was going to live with the consequences of those choices. The next few days passed in a blur of legal meetings, police interviews, and phone calls from friends and family who'd heard about the divorce. Vanessa had moved out, staying with her sister Rachel, who called me 3 times to tell me what a monster I was for destroying Vanessa's life over a misunderstanding, as if planning to steal $400,000 and flee the country was something that could happen by accident. Colin, meanwhile, was facing his own reckoning. His wife had indeed taken their children and filed for divorce, but that was the least of his problems. The hospital administration had launched a full investigation into his activities, and the police were looking into the financial irregularities Dave had uncovered. It turned out that the scheme with Vanessa wasn't Colin's first attempt at fraud. It was just the first time he'd been caught. I was in my office on Wednesday morning trying to focus on actual work for the first time in weeks, when Dave called with an update. "Colin's been arrested," he said without preamble. "For what?" "Insurance fraud, primarily. The investigation into his billing practices turned up about $2 million in false claims over the past 5 years. The thing with Vanessa was just the tip of the iceberg." I felt a grim satisfaction at the news. "What about Vanessa?" "No charges yet, but the district attorney is reviewing the evidence. Conspiracy to commit fraud is still a felony, even if the fraud wasn't completed." After Dave hung up, I sat in my office thinking about justice and revenge and the difference between the two. I'd set out to protect myself from Vanessa's scheme, but somewhere along the way, it had become about something more. It had become about making sure she faced consequences for her choices. My phone rang again. This time it was Patricia. "I have news about the divorce proceedings," she said. "Given the evidence of attempted fraud, Vanessa's attorney is recommending she accept our initial settlement offer." Which means you keep the house, the business, and all the assets. She gets nothing except her personal belongings and whatever money she had in her individual accounts. It was more than I dared to hope for. In most divorces, assets get split down the middle regardless of who's at fault. But Vanessa's attempt to defraud me had changed the calculation entirely. "There's one more thing," Patricia continued. "Vanessa wants to speak with you. Her attorney says she has something she wants to say." I considered this. Part of me never wanted to see Vanessa again, but another part was curious about what she could possibly have to say at this point. "Set it up," I said. The meeting took place in Patricia's office the following afternoon. Vanessa looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was limp and unwashed, her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes, and she'd lost weight in a way that made her look gaunt rather than attractive. "Hello, Eli," she said when I walked into the conference room. "Vanessa." We sat across from each other with our lawyers flanking us like seconds in a duel. For a long moment, nobody spoke. "I wanted to apologize," Vanessa said finally. "Okay. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry for all of it." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. Instead, I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine remorse. "Why?" I asked. "Not why are you sorry, but why did you do it in the first place?" Vanessa was quiet for so long, I thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I felt trapped. In our marriage, in this town, in the life we'd built. Colin made me feel like there was a way out, like I could be someone different, someone more exciting. So you decided to steal my money and disappear. It wasn't supposed to hurt you. Colin said we could make it look like an investment gone bad, something that wasn't anyone's fault. But it would have hurt me. It would have destroyed me. I know that now. I knew it then too, but I didn't let myself think about it. I just focused on getting away. I looked at this woman I'd once loved, trying to reconcile the person sitting across from me with the person I'd married 8 years ago. Maybe the Vanessa I'd fallen in love with had been real, and somewhere along the way she'd changed into someone else. Or maybe I'd never really known her at all. What happens now? I asked. I don't know. My job is gone, obviously. I'll probably have to leave Pine Harbor, start over somewhere else. And Colin? Colin's going to prison. His lawyer thinks he'll get at least 5 years, maybe more. She looked up at me with something that might have been hope. I testified against him, told the prosecutors everything I knew about his other schemes. In exchange for immunity? In exchange for a lighter sentence. I'm still going to face charges, but probably just probation and restitution. I nodded. It seemed fair, given that she'd been manipulated by Colin, even if she'd been a willing participant in the manipulation. I have something for you, Vanessa said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. Inside was a cashier's check for $15,000. It's everything I have left, she said. I know it doesn't come close to what I almost took from you, but it's something. I stared at the check, surprised by the gesture. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. It's the only way I can live with myself. I folded the check and put it in my jacket pocket. Thank you. Eli? Vanessa's voice was small, uncertain. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? I considered the question seriously. The anger was still there and the hurt, but they were fading. What remained was mostly sadness. For the marriage we'd lost, for the people we'd failed to be for each other, for the way things had ended. I think so, I said finally. Not today, maybe not for a long time, but eventually. Vanessa nodded, tears starting to fall. I hope you find someone who deserves you. Someone who won't take you for granted the way I did. I hope you find whatever it was you were looking for. We signed the divorce papers that afternoon. 8 years of marriage, reduced to signatures on legal documents, Vanessa left Pine Harbor the following week, moving back to Boston where she'd grown up. I heard through mutual friends that she'd found work at a small nonprofit, making a fraction of what she'd earned at the hospital, but apparently finding some measure of peace in the work. Colin was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. His medical license was revoked, his assets were seized to pay restitution to the insurance companies he'd defrauded, and his wife was granted full custody of their children. The last I heard, he was working in the prison library and had found religion, though I wasn't sure how sincere that conversion was. As for me, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. The business recovered from the chaos of the divorce, and I even expanded into cybersecurity consulting, helping other small businesses protect themselves from the kind of schemes Colin had been running. It felt good to use my skills to help people, instead of just to protect myself. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Jenna at a coffee shop downtown. She was with a colleague from the hospital, a pediatric nurse named Sarah, who had kind eyes and an easy laugh. We talked for a few minutes about work and family, and when Sarah excused herself to take a phone call, Jenna gave me a knowing look. She's single, she said. I'm not ready for that yet. I know, but when you are, she's the kind of person who would never fake a pregnancy to steal your money. I laughed, realizing it was the first time I'd found anything about my situation genuinely funny. That's a pretty low bar, Jenna. Sometimes low bars are exactly what we need. A year later, I asked Sarah out for coffee. 2 years after that, I asked her to marry me. She said yes, and this time I knew, really knew, that the person I was marrying was exactly who she appeared to be. On our wedding day, as I stood at the altar waiting for Sarah to walk down the aisle, I thought briefly about Vanessa. I wondered if she'd found whatever she'd been searching for, if she'd learned to be content with a simpler life, if she'd ever found someone who could love her without needing to be deceived. Then Sarah appeared in the doorway, radiant in her simple white dress, and I stopped thinking about the past entirely. Some stories end with revenge, others with forgiveness. The best ones end with a chance to begin again. But this particular story, the story of Vanessa's fake pregnancy and Colin's scheme and my methodical dismantling of their plans, this story ends with justice. Not the explosive, violent justice of movies and novels, but the quiet, thorough justice of truth coming to light and consequences following actions. Vanessa had gambled that she could manipulate me, steal from me, and disappear without facing any repercussions. She'd been wrong. Colin had believed his position and reputation would protect him from scrutiny. He'd been wrong too. In the end, they'd both learned the same lesson. When you build your plans on lies and deception, eventually the foundation crumbles. And when it does, it takes everything down with it.